following is a presentation of the Broadband Universe, brought to you in part by Vitruvi, the end-to-end GIS-based construction management platform that connects asset owners, operators, general contractors, and subcontractors for unmatched project control and collaboration. Manage every aspect of your telecommunications or utility infrastructure construction program with Vitruvi. Build faster, reduce costs, improve quality. Book your demo today on vitruvisoftware.com to see how we can help you build at scale. Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of the Broadband Universe. I'm Craig Corbin. Thanks so much for joining us today. It is a pleasure to have my guests from the Broadband Success Partners, the founders and principals, Mr. Jack Burton, Mr. David Strauss. Gentlemen, welcome to the Broadband Universe.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. It is always a treat to be able to talk about topics within the industry. And David, I know that you and I guess, first met at Fiber Connect a couple of years back, had a great conversation there. And so glad to have you and Jack joining today. And so much to talk about because a lot has changed since we first met a couple of years back at Fiber Connect. But before we get into Broadband Success Partners and telling that story, I think it would be appropriate for our viewers to be able to know a little bit about each of the two of you, the founding principals there at Broadband Success Partners. David, let's start with you. Give us a bit of your background within the industry, if you would, please.
Sure. Thanks, Craig. So I have been in the cable sector since 2006, having been in technology at IBM prior to that, and actually in the wireless sector back in the 90s, which was quite the heyday, if you will, cowboy days, as we like to call it, both at AT&T and Sprint. And then joined the sector, that being the cable sector in '06 as VP of Marketing at Lightpath. And then helped Comcast launch their Metro Ethernet services, had a 4-year consulting gig there. Then sold into the sector at Juniper Networks. And then in 2017, Jack and I met up and launched this business.
That is awesome. And Jack, give us your background, if you would, please, sir.
Sure. It goes way back. Right out of college in the early 1980s, I started working for Warner Cable. They sent me out to Cincinnati on a training program and got to do every job in the cable system, which was a really great foundation. I got to do everything from selling, running service calls, digging ditches, working in customer service, stuffing envelopes, going out to the installs, all of that. And I stayed on in Cincinnati as staff engineer. My boss there, when he went to Tribune United in Rockville, he took me with him. That's where I got first exposed to fiber optics. We were one of the very first cable systems to use fiber to link some of our facilities. Also got exposed to business services there, which was another good foundational thing. Then left the broadband industry for a little while and worked for MTV. I was audio video engineering, studios, playback facilities, satellite uplinks, and some of the productions I got to work on. It was a great fun time. But some changes happened in the executive suite, and that ended up with me moving over to Cablevision. I ended up staying at Cablevision for 28 years. Started out building fiber optic networks there. Started using my business services experience to help use that fiber as a competitive access provider. That became Lightpath, the business services arm of Cablevision. I officially moved over to Lightpath and ran network engineering there for 10 years. I helped turn Lightpath into a CLEC and a Metro Ethernet carrier. Moved over to corporate engineering, helped launch residential telephony, which became hugely successful. And did a lot of different things at corporate, including all kinds of R&D into network transport, next generation hybrid fiber coax, and fiber to the home. And at corporate, I represented Cablevision at Cable Labs. I chaired the Cable Labs Packet Cable Cert Board for about 8 years as well.
That's very exciting. Such an important organization. And obviously, guys, with the background, the foundations within the industry that the two of you bring to the table, there's a lot of strength there and knowledge to serve as that foundation for the Broadband Success Partners. David, you touched on it a moment ago when you mentioned the point at which you and Jack began formulating the concept for this. Take us back to that point.
Sure.
What was the genesis for your consultancy?
Well, it's very interesting. Great question. And so, we had both worked at Cablevision, but we didn't know one another, as it so happens. And somebody who knew both of us said, you'd be pretty good together. So he introduced me to Jack, and when we first opened our doors in October 2017, we're actually serving the vendors in the space, the likes of Adtran and Vecima and Sienna, Calix, and others, with thought leadership content. And about a year into this business, just got an inquiry out of the blue, frankly. They were looking for technical due diligence work associated with M&A, right? So this was a buy-side player, a bidder on a particular network that needed a technical advisor. That's really Jack, not me. And so, Jack advised, and that was the first of what is now 43 engagements later. It's been a wonderful, wonderful run. We hit the market, obviously, at the right time, with very little competition. There are, a number of very large commercial advisors in the space, but when it comes to the technical aspect of it, that was an underserved niche within the market. So we got very lucky.
That is interesting when you talk about dealing with mergers, acquisitions. There is a tremendous need for the expertise that Broadband Success Partners brings to the table. But when you incorporate network design and the product launches, the marketing, and the sales also that comes into the expertise that you bring, I'm always curious about the response that an organization will get from clients over the course of time as a result of that relationship. And I'll ask that question of both of you. Jack, if you could give your perspective on that.
Repeat business pretty much says that our clients are satisfied. But beyond that, David actually conducted a market research effort earlier this year. And David, you should tell Craig
Sure.
about.
Yeah, so we started 2022 doing what Jack just mentioned, and the response was extremely positive. The Net Promoter Score, almost 90%, which is somewhat unheard of. So
Wow.
the willingness of our clients to recommend us to others, and frankly, that's, I think, an ingredient for our success. Word of mouth, though, these bidders, these private equity firms, these infrastructure funds compete against one another, but, word gets out. Who advised you? Who did that assessment of that network, kind of thing? And if they're satisfied with the quality of the work, which clearly the survey indicated they were, then it spreads. And I think that's a lot of it. And as Jack noted, we've had a number of very loyal clients who've come to us a second, a third, a fourth time.
We also have cross-pollination
That's
going
exciting.
on where an executive in one firm will go join another, and he'll bring us with him.
That's right.
That's happened a few times already.
That's a great thing. You made mention of the technical assessment. Jack, talk to us, if you would, about that process.
Yeah. Normally what we do is a two-phased approach. We start out with phase one, which is a remote effort. We go through the transaction data room and all applicable documents that they provide. We create a list of questions. We have a very large list of questions. We edit it down to take out stuff that they've already answered, and what's left over we submit. They hopefully answer in writing, and then we follow up with a call with management, where we not only get direct answers to remaining questions, we also get a feel for the expertise, if you will, of the people we're dealing with. Are they very familiar with what they've got and how to run it? And we get a good feel for them that way. Then we go out and fill in all the blanks and write up a comprehensive report. Then phase two, if the client so chooses to go to it, we do on site. We'll go out to key properties that are part of the asset, take a look at all their facilities, including their core, their inside plant, their outside plant, their workforce, their support facilities like warehouses and maintenance yards and things like that. We'll look at their customer service, their network operations center, and again, take a lot of pictures as we're out, write up commentary, and submit another report. And then those two reports form the complete product that we give for a due diligence effort.
And it's not unusual for us to then do a
Awesome.
readout, right? Obviously deliver the report,
Okay.
but read out with the client themselves. So.
And one other thing I didn't mention, usually our phase one report, if it's involving a non-fiber asset, we would talk about upgrade paths and what the acquirer might need to keep in mind for how to bring the network up to snuff to compete with fiber networks, or in some cases we might recommend that they overbuild with a fiber network. Besides fiber and cable, we also report on copper and fixed wireless.
Interesting. You're watching the Broadband Universe podcast, brought to you in part by Lit Communities. Light up your community. You deserve better internet. By Vetro Fiber Map, radically simpler fiber management. By On Track, proven leader in connectivity. And by Vitruvi, build faster, reduce costs, and improve quality. My guest today, Mr. Jack Burton, Mr. David Strauss, the founders and principals at Broadband Success Partners. And Jack, you touched on something just a moment ago with regard to the technical assessment. The infrastructure component is such a vital part, obviously, of any provider's setup. And with the demand for greater bandwidth that's out there, obviously there's a need to make sure that the status of that infrastructure is in great condition. I know that is, I'm sure, for most, the biggest challenge, perhaps, in dipping their toe into this pool. Talk about that, if you would.
Well, yeah, the condition of the plant is very important. Once you have a fiber to the home plant built for a passive optical network, you can then upgrade that to future technologies very easily by just changing equipment at the central office or hub and at the customer prem. When you're dealing with other networks like hybrid fiber coax, the upgrade path is much more complicated. You may have to change the amplifiers, you may have to change the fiber nodes, you might even have to change the passive taps between the head end or hub and the customer. And that's why inspecting that condition and reviewing that condition is a very important thing to do.
No doubt. David, you mentioned earlier in the conversation your work in past years with respect to product launches and the marketing, the sales end of thing. That's also vitally important for anyone in this industry. Talk about the mindset that you at Broadband Success Partners bring to these client relationships.
Well, you know, Craig, what we do is when we first introduce ourselves to these clients, obviously we're telling them about our backgrounds and our areas of expertise. And so obviously we're available to help in a number of different areas. And you're absolutely right. The go-to-market component is absolutely critical. And there are occasions when a client will ask us to comment on that and provide our perspective and criticism, if you will, constructive. But generally speaking, that's not why they're coming to us. It's really the technical expertise that Jack brings to the table. And we now have grown, right? We have two other gentlemen on the team, Jay Rolls, former CTO of Charter, Randy Kinsey, who worked for him at both Cox and at Charter, and most recently was at Point Broadband. So while we can help with go-to-market, and we're certainly happy to do so, that's generally not why they're coming to us. They're separately hiring, a commercial advisor, a company like an Altman Salon or an EY Parthenon, for example, to do that work. And by the way, we work very closely with these other companies because, for example, they're building models, right, about the opportunity to grow the business, right? Where can it expand? How can it expand? And at what rate? And there are some inputs into their models that are technical in nature. So we're actually validating, confirming, giving them different inputs as necessary to their models. So it's really been an interesting and very productive collaborative relationship with those types of firms.
And we talk about this being sort of I refer to it as the golden age, if you will, with the tremendous amount of capital that is available for utilization in this sector. The next 5-10 years, sort of like the Wild West in some ways with regard to all the activity that's out there. Obviously, you have already done dozens of the assessments that you've talked about. What do you see going forward with respect to the volume of activity that you'll have there at Broadband
It's a good
Success
question,
Partners?
very good question. It's interesting. I think, look, we don't have a view of the broad market, so to speak. We know our patch, if you will. But, all signs are very positive, and you're right. There's a tremendous amount of capital, and you obviously want to deploy that capital intelligently, and that's where we come into the picture as part of that equation. But, one of the areas that we often talk to our clients about, and Jack alluded to it a moment ago, vis-a-vis the non-fiber assets, right? There are a ton of them out there. There are a ton of small telephone companies, for example, in every state. Dozens and dozens and dozens of them, right? Are they ripe for upgrade? Is there an opportunity there for investment? And in some cases, there very much is. So I know everybody's very enamored with fiber. However, there are opportunities that don't involve fiber, at least at the outset. So from that vantage point, I think the future continues to be very bright as long as these investors are considering those assets.
And to that point, there are many locations across the country that geographically and with regard to the density of population that will never be met with fiber networks, and that's where the alternative methods of delivery will continue to be so important. Jack, from a technical standpoint, I'm always curious as we see the growth of bandwidth that is available now to the general populace, and it seems as though that the more that we have, the more we want. And I'm curious where you see that threshold of, well, when you get this much bandwidth, you really don't need anything more. Your
Sure.
thoughts there?
Today, I think when you get up to around something approaching a gigabit, certainly a gigabit symmetrical, but you don't even need symmetrical. Gigabit download speed, you're able to serve pretty much all the present day technology devices that you might want or have in a home. Where that is going to increase, or I shouldn't say going to, where it might increase is if virtual reality and augmented reality take off, because those technologies need bandwidth far more than streaming video does. Streaming video, both entertainment and applications like the one we're doing here for this podcast, those require decent amounts of bandwidth, but really nothing terrific. Certainly 100 megabits symmetrical is enough to do that sort of thing. Multiply that by the number of connections that might be going on simultaneously in a home, and you still come up with something under a gigabit. Augmented reality and virtual reality, they start needing hundreds of megabits. So multiple of those applications might exceed the gigabit. And things are heading in that direction now. There are 2.5 gigabit services coming online. Altice here in New York recently launched 5 gigabit residential service to those that want to pay for it. And the PON standards are increasing too. We have XGS PON, which is a 10 gigabit shared service, very popular now, but that's going to increase to 25 gigabits in short order.
Interesting. So much that I can't wait to talk in future conversations about with you gentlemen. Greatly appreciate the opportunity to have visited today. I always have to make the offer for those who would like to avail themselves of your services. What's the best way to touch base with Broadband Success
Two ways.
Partners?
They can email me at dstrauss, Strauss, at broadbandsuccess.com, or they can call 917-806-5567. Would be happy to help.
Awesome.
Sure.
Guys, can't thank you enough. It has been a blast. Look forward to the next opportunity to find what is going on with Broadband Success Partners.
Thanks,
Jack,
Greg.
David,
Appreciate it.
thanks
Thank
for
you.
being with us. On behalf of these guys, we thank you for letting us be a part of your day. We'll see you next time right here on the Broadband Universe. So long, everyone.